everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Outside Insider podcast here on Philly Sports Network with myself, Liam Jenkins. We are just over 24 hours away from the biggest game of the season. Eagles versus Saints, round 2 after the 48-7 humiliation job earlier in the year. This time, it's personal, as they say. This is about as professional as this show gets. I mean, that did borderline sound like a TV promotion. But it's a big one. It's the NFC divisional round. If the Eagles win, are they going to win the Super Bowl? Can they go all the way and do the unthinkable one more time and really establish a dynasty? Or are Drew Brees and the mouthy Alvin Kamara going to get the last laugh with New Orleans taking their place in the conference championship? We're going to discuss that and a lot more on today's show. So if you're new around here, if you've not yet subscribed, I don't know why you wouldn't. I'm a high-pitched British kid talking about the birds. I don't know why you wouldn't want this injected into your veins. So if you are new, slam that subscribe button. If you're on iTunes, rate 5 stars. Leave a nice little poem in the review because it means a lot, you know. We want to try and rise up the charts and stuff and beat some of the other podcasts out there. So if you could do that, just leave a little crescendo poem. I mean, is that a poem? A crescendo? No, a crescendo, according to Google, is the loudest point reached in a gradually increasing sound. So please don't go in the review section just for like loads of like the letter A and then it's slowly getting into capitals, because that's not going to help. But if you could leave a nice review, that'd be good. And talking of that as well, just a massive thank you to all of the support recently, like especially on the YouTube channel. I know I kind of give the big soppy thank yous every week, but we're nearly on 6,000 subscribers now. And that is a little bit mental. Like, considering, again, this started with just a website 5 years ago. Now we have the iTunes podcast. It's uploading to YouTube. We've had 2 film rooms and 2 podcasts this week. Don't tell me I'm not grinding my ass off to give you guys as much content as you can consume. I want to overload you to the point you're like, damn, Liam's giving me too much. I don't know what to do with it. Like, this kid's just, he's too hot to handle. Maybe just lukewarm. We'll go with lukewarm. But it genuinely does mean the world to me. So thank you so much for all of your support. On that note, actually, before we move on to the show, I made a little promise, didn't I, on Twitter, for those of you that follow me, at Liam Jenkins 21, nice little plug there, that I would give you guys a nickname. Now, all of a sudden, over the last, I would say, 6 months, the following on YouTube for the film rooms, and especially the podcast, which is quite a niche of sarcasm-loving Eagles fans that for somewhat have an affiliation with the British accent. They, you know, it's great. So for this little circle of fans, this little hive, I wanted a nickname. You know, a lot of great podcasts and outlets and YouTube channels and persons, all their fans, they're sort of like names, they're little groups and clans, and they fight against each other. I'm not quite, you know, Ariana Grande stan level yet, but I have come up with a nickname for anyone that listens to this podcast, and it is the most horrific thing I've actually ever done. And I've done some bad things in my time. I mean, there was one event, just for context, where, as a child, I stole someone's Yu-Gi-Oh cards, and I cried all night because I felt so guilty about it. Tried to give them back to the kid the next day, and he smacked me in the mouth. Smacked me in the mouth. I went through a night of emotional torment because of my own horrible actions, and he still I'm still bitter. I'm still bitter about it. But I was thinking for a while that this podcast has come on leaps and bounds. It's become a very sassy, white girl emoji level podcast. And having a name like the Outside Insiders, it makes it a bit difficult to get a nickname for everyone that listens to it. The best I can come up with, unless anyone wants to offer an alternate solution, is that the initials for the podcast is TOI, right? The Outside Insider. What about the Toy Boys with a TOI BO? Just end it. End the show, Liam. Just cut it off before it gets too bad. But genuinely, no, if you've got any other idea for what you guys want to be referred to as or listen to this show, let me know in the comments. Because if you walk around with a shirt that says Toy Boy on it, it's going to send the wrong message. But you might get lucky as well. So if you get lucky because of this podcast, that's a thing. On that note, there is Captain CRE'VON merch available in a link in the description below. And we're going to be giving away one of those shirts. All you have to do to win is send me a bit of evidence on Twitter that you're getting someone to listen to this podcast. So whether you're filming someone, you've taken over the aux cable, you've taken Drake and his Summer Games song because your friend's in his feelings, you've ripped that out, or you've plugged in this podcast and you film their reaction, or you message it to a match on Tinder, or you play it at a wedding, or so, anything like that, send me a video. If it's decent and I enjoy it, I will send you a free t-shirt. But you have to do it as creatively as possible. There will be a power ranking. It's all going to get fun. So my Twitter is @LiamJenkins21. Tweet me proof of you getting someone to listen to this podcast. I will send you a Captain CRE'VON t-shirt. Unless 500 of you do it, then I might just send you my credit card to pay off. It's entirely up to you. But it's been 5 minutes and we've not spoken about the birds. And I think that's probably for the best, if I'm honest, due to the overwhelming sense of anxiety that any fan is going to have having opened this video. But it is about time we kick things off. And before we do get into the Eagles versus Saints matchup, there's one headline that has just sort of dominated the radio waves. And I say that like I listen to American radio stations, which I can't do legally due to geographical restrictions. But I know from Twitter and the accounts of the presenters what's being said. Mate, I don't know why radio is so different to what beat writers get, but it's obviously for sensationalist sort of news and stuff. But the main thing hasn't been, wow, this team is amazing and they can go all the way in the playoffs and do that thing again. Nor has it been, wow, Captain CRE'VON may be the greatest Eagles cornerback of all time. Nor has it been, wow, Jim Schwartz has somehow turned this defense into what could be one of the most dangerous in the NFL. Instead, we're focusing on Carson Wentz is worth 2 first-round picks and Von Miller. Nick Foles is doing this, he's signing that, he wants to be in Philly, no he doesn't. And it is just ridiculous. And you know what it reminds me of? This whole quarterback controversy. There is no quarterback controversy as far as I'm concerned. At all. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. In that locker room, there is no quarterback controversy. I'm saying that's so British. Controversy! There we go. Controversy. There is no quarterback. That was disgusting. There's no quarterback controversy. Not right now. But if you listen to radio, it would sound like the sky is falling down. And, oh my god, Carson Wentz is worth 2 first-round picks and the Eagles should trade him and sign a running back and also upgrade their locker room because it smells. And that is the level of talk where we're at right now. And do you know what it genuinely reminds me of? Okay? I had this happen to me the other day at work. There's a British bakery called Greg's. They serve lovely breakfast. It costs £2. You get a coffee, you get a bacon roll. It's bliss, alright? First thing in the morning is what you want. I go into work, I sit down, my coffee, my bacon roll. I'm editing an article on Nate Sudfeld, and I'll get to that later in this podcast. And someone sits next to me, looks at my bacon roll, and goes, do you not feel bad for the pig? And I was like, well, yeah, but right now I'm focusing on eating the pig because it's in a bun and I'm hungry, so you just let me, you know. I just politely said, well, you know, I'm not vegan or vegetarian, I understand the logic, but it's just not for me, I like meat. And she was like, but it's so harmful. Do you not realise that if everyone just started eating plants and daffodils, that all the pigs would be alright again and that they'd live in, basically just a whole vegan speech. And I was like, just let me eat my breakfast. We'll worry about that later. Alright, I'll happily debate to you why I enjoy my bacon roll in the morning. I'll happily debate to you why I don't agree with being vegan personally, although I can understand why others would. But right now, I'm focused on eating my breakfast before I start a 9-hour shift at work. We don't need to worry about the impact on the planet, or the impact on the animals that are being killed and not sold, or the way that they're killed, or any. It just doesn't matter. Like, let me eat my breakfast. And that is exactly what's going on with the Eagles quarterback situation right now. The Eagles could become, theoretically, the 8th NFL franchise to win back-to-back Super Bowls. No franchise has yet to win 3, and I'm not being funny. I would kind of put money on the Eagles being the first team to do that. If they can somehow win this second, they go into next year with Carson Wentz, who's not recovering from his torn ACL, who's going to be fully healthy, have a full off-season with the team, have a full off-season with the coordinator. And this could be the most miraculous turnaround in sporting history. To go for an Eagles team that went through a 52-year drought, that got so close back in 2005 and fell due to the whole Cheatgate scandal, which we're not going to get into today, probably. And now, after the end of the Chip Kelly era, which literally ruined a locker room, within 3 years, Doug Peterson has the potential to go to 2 Super Bowls. And if he wins 2, who's to say he won't win that 3rd? But instead, we're talking about the impact of an off-season, which as of right now, although it does matter greatly to some people on Twitter, is irrelevant. And although it matters greatly to the radio stations who need the listeners, it doesn't really matter right now. Let Doug eat his ice cream. Let me eat my bacon roll. We're not here to talk about what's going to happen in 6 months' time. Or what happens if everyone stops eating bacon. Or what happens if that pig decides to get traded and then end up on a different farm and then not be killed and then has a little happy family. I'm there to eat my breakfast. The Eagles are not going into this game travelling down to Louisiana. See, I know where that is now. And saying, oh, well, actually, what do we do after this game? What happens? What happens with Nick Foles? Is he a free agent? Do we keep him? Do we let him go? No one's saying that. It is literally all sensationalist. To a point, you had a report come out saying Carson Wentz is worth 2 first-round picks according to a source or something, which then got downgraded. How can you put a value on that? That's someone's opinion as a report, which then gets told is a BS anyway. It is just ridiculous. Like, can we for once just enjoy the moment, focus on what matters, and approach Sunday with just full passion, full heads of steam on what's going to go down? This literally could be one of the greatest stories in the history of sport. If Nick Foles, the underdog from a 3rd round pick, can come in, who then ends up being traded for Sam Bradford, which we all know I'm a Sam Bradford stan, unfortunately, and that hill was mine to die on. The hill is now buried under another hill, which stands with CRE'VON LeBlanc at the top. We'll get to that later. But for Foles to go from there, to go to Jeff Fisher's offense, to then be cut so viciously on Hard Knocks, and then make his way to Kansas City after almost giving up, and it was Peterson who encouraged him to continue. Then he comes to Philly, then he backs up Wentz, then he wins the Super Bowl in the most remarkable fashion ever, and then, somehow, in Week 14, thunder strikes twice, Carson Wentz goes down with injury, and in comes arguably the most clutch quarterback of all time. Not only does he guide the Eagles to 3 consecutive wins, but on a 4th and goal, with this season, with the game, with everything on the line, he does it again. And somehow that's not what we're talking about. Instead, we're talking about money, the future, months down the line, decisions that nobody has any idea what's going on with right now. I understand the motive. I mean, there was a great comparison by Benjamin Albright, who, as you know, if you've been a long-term listener, has been a friend of the show. He's been on the Outside Insider podcast. Fantastic reporter. It's great to see him get the credit he deserves now. But he essentially compared this situation to what happened with Tom Brady back in the late 90s and the decision to trade Drew Bledsoe. And it's not that far different. But again, it's down the line. So let's just focus on what's in front of us, talk about Eagles versus Saints, how the team can win, why it's so important, and everything else won't matter. Now, I say that, I'm going to be very hypocritical and start talking about another angle to this a bit later on regarding Nate Sudfeld, but this whole narrative of there being some quarterback battle when no one knows the future of this team, the future of this team, mistakenly, was accused of having a hickey on his neck. He didn't have a hickey on his neck last week. That's the future of this team. We don't need to worry. I mean, what a duo that is. You've got Big Dick Nick and then Carson Wentz, the little saucy Migs. This is fantastic. What content you're getting. But genuinely, it is just not worth even paying attention to. The minute the season ends, that's when you look at free agency. There's a reason I haven't done any free agency content. I haven't touched any draft content just yet. Because there's no point. You don't know how long. This could be going all the way to the Super Bowl. And we're going to waste time talking about stuff that doesn't really matter. But I'd love to know what you think though, guys. Make sure, again, if you are new around here on the Outside Insider podcast, make sure you're hitting that like button. Hit and subscribe as well. Like, if you're not on YouTube yet and not subscribed, make sure you do that one. We'd love to get to 6,000 subscribers by, let's say, January 25th. We'll go with that one. That's our goal, January 25th. On iTunes, though, and Apple Podcasts, that's where we really need your help. So if you could leave a rating on iTunes or Apple Podcasts, that would be great. Just leave 5 stars and a couple kind words if you enjoy what we do. And then hit subscribe as well, because that's how we can grow this show. It's how we can get Dollar Shave Club to sponsor it. No, I'm kidding. They're never going to sponsor us. But it's how we can get bigger and better guests on for you as well. Like, we've had some amazing ones over the last 12 months. I want to continue that deep into next season. So let's talk a little bit about this matchup then and what the Eagles need to do. Because there is a deep weakness on this Saints team. And as much as we all love to look at Drew Brees and look at that offense and see 48 points and get PTSD, understandably, there is a major flaw. And it's one that, believe it or not, the Eagles are actually very well poised to exploit. The only downside is that it would be very risky in doing so. Now, you may have guessed what I'm referencing. It is, of course, taking those deep shots down the field, because the Saints, believe it or not, are absolutely atrocious against deep, or just their pass defense overall hasn't been very good this season. No matter what metric you look at, what statistic you want to go. In fact, I mean, a lot of people on this show will know that the DVOA ranking, which for some reason that is taken as gospel now, DVOA. I understand it's a very accurate metric. So if you want to live on DVOA hill, then the Saints defense actually is literally bottom of the NFL on deep passes, according to Football Outsiders, who I believe developed that metric. I may be wrong. But dead last. 32nd against deep passes. Now, the problem is that Nick Foles, stunningly, no matter what the eye test may tell you after those dazzling throws he made last week, hasn't been very good on the deep ball. According to Michael Kist on Twitter from Bleeding Green Nation, Foles was 2 for 5, 1 interception, and a 44 quarterback rating last weekend. So you've got a quarterback that, according to statistics, struggled last week on the deep ball against a defense that can't defend it. Now, the good news is that the Eagles are very well built in the receiver corps to at least deliver quite the punch. You've got guys like Golden Tate, who caught that tremendous shot over the middle, absorbing contact and going to the ground to keep a drive alive. You've got Alshon Jeffrey, who is a 50-50 machine. Nelson Aguilar, who himself has caught several big deep pass shots for the Eagles this season. Not to mention guys like Jordan Matthews, who've come up quite clutch at times. And the inevitable Zach Ertz domination tree as well. So if there's ever a team that's going to take advantage of that weakness, it has to be the Eagles. And why is that so important? This offense, as you already know, is kind of a big deal. No matter how you look at it, they put up the third most total points in the NFL this season, averaging over 30 points per game. And while their rushing attack was impressive, averaging over 120 yards per game, their passing attack wasn't as, let's say, as dominant as, let's say, Pittsburgh's or Kansas City. But when you've got Drew Brees throwing the ball, that's kind of all you need. And Brees has been an absolute monster. I don't know how he's doing it, if I'm honest, at the age he is. Like, it genuinely blows my mind a little bit. I mean, this man has been in the league since 2001 and is firing off one of his most accurate seasons that I've ever witnessed. Well, I say firing, I mean, it's already fired. Like, the season's complete. He ended this season with a career-high 74.4 completion percentage. In fact, every year since 2016, it's gone up by 2%. The man is just an absolute machine. And I understand that a lot of that is due to the offense and the fact that you've now got someone like Alvin Kamara who can catch those check down passes, to someone like Michael Thomas, who is probably one of the NFL's biggest security blankets. I totally understand that. And stopping Drew Brees is going to be a nightmare, because while he's not going to give you the rushing threat of a Mitchell Trubisky, it doesn't matter what kind of pressure you get to him. It's Drew Brees. He doesn't have eyes, he just has lasers, and they fire wherever they please. So something has got to be done to stop this. And if Drew Brees gets going, let's just say theoretically the Saints get a possession first, the Saints score, and Nick Foles is on the back foot. Doug Peterson has got to... You can't get a PTSD scenario or cave in. You've got to stay aggressive. And Nick Foles has done a great job of doing that. I don't care, frankly, about the 2-5 record, that he's kind of completed 2 of 5 passes. When you look at the way he orchestrated that drive down the field, I mean, if I'm honest, I would much rather see a quarterback be accurate in the intermediate section of the field. And Foles, according to my calculation, this is something I worked out when breaking down the film. I don't know if this is correct, but I charted him as 8 for 13 in situations between 10 yards and above So that's passes to the middle, it's going to be comebacks, and then obviously those shots as well, with 1 interception. Now, there was a touchdown involved as well, so it was 1 and 1. So you had 1 touchdown, 1 interception, 8 for 13. Or 9, it was 8 for 13 or 9, it was one of the two. But either way, like, that's impressive. I would take that, knowing that you've got a quarterback that can drive and get you a first down on one play. Like, it doesn't, if you're going to chart just deep plays, which traditionally I think his passes are either 15 yards or 20 yards plus, then it's got to be sporadic because you're relying on 1, the ball placement, 2, the receiver, 3, the coverage, 4, the safety. There's a lot that goes into a deep completion. And some of it, I'm not going to say is luck, but to get all of those factors co-aligned, it can be a rarity in the NFL. Because that 20-yard pass, in essence, could be a screen if it goes that far. And that's something worth noting. So Nick Foles at the minute, I would say, is playing some of the best football we've ever seen. The one thing I would say he has to avoid is the turnover differential. Because last year, it feels like last year, gee, it's been such a long week. But last Sunday, the Bears had a +2 turnover differential. +2. +2. And they lost. And they didn't deserve to win. And what's worse is the Eagles defense should have been stripping away balls and picking off passes left, right and centre. They weren't. But you cannot get a +2 turnover differential and find a way to lose that game. That was the Bears' game to lose. They absolutely did so in every possible sense of the word. But Nick Foles has got to punish him now for it. He's got to punish the Saints and push that ball deep down the field. But the minute that... It's almost like he needs one mandatory ugly turnover a game. It's like before he heats up and starts throwing no-look dimes 20 yards down the field to Golden Tate or Alshon Jeffrey. Before we get to that point, we've got to see Nick Foles just kind of like look in the middle of the field, see nothing but Bears defenders, with all his receivers lined up in a bunch to the right, and go, screw it, why not? Let's just throw it and see what happens. And I genuinely feel like that can be a cause for concern. But if Foles can get action in the middle of the field with Zach Ertz, Dallas Goedert as well, run a lot of 12 personnel, if they can force the Saints defense to avoid stacking that box and then compensate outside, because that was what they did, bear in mind. The Saints' entire game plan during that matchup was to take away the run, put the game on Carson Wentz's shoulders. And I spoke about this several times. I don't care how you view that quote from the Peter King article of, oh, well, when Wentz is thrown between this many yards and that many yards, he's this and this record, and that's why we're doing it. It worked. It doesn't matter if you think, well, most of those games were in his rookie year. Like, it doesn't matter. Sean Payton is a head coach. One of his personnel and scouting team spotted a weakness and a trend. They capitalized on it. And the Eagles did the exact same to the Rams. And they did the exact same to the Texans. And it worked. Taking away the run game works. Because it forces the game on, in those teams, 2 very young quarterbacks. That's exactly what the Saints did. Now, looking forward to this game, the Eagles, if they can force the Saints to stop stacking the box, and bear in mind that Wendell Smallwood, who has been seeing a huge chunk of action in the last few weeks, sees, I think that it's statistically the lowest amount of defenders in a box in the NFL per snap or something like that. Like, he just sees no one cares when Wendell Smallwood has the ball. Defenders just sort of stand there and go, yeah, let him run, he'll fall over. Or something like that. I know that's exaggerating, but that's the traditional ethos here. If the Eagles can force the Saints to come and stack the box, to get Josh Adams through the middle, to get Smallwood outside, now you've got Darren Sproles, and he's starting to make a few big plays again now, whether that's in the receiving game, whether it's in pass protection. Get creative like the Bears did. Force the Saints to draw guys inside, and that's when Nick Foles will have the confidence. Get the play-action game opening up. And that, for me, will be the biggest key. It's all down to the run and the play-action. If the Eagles can stay committed to the run and find a way to make it work, I genuinely think they win this game. Because it opens up the play-action pass, that means they can pass deep downfield, and that is a huge weakness of the Saints. It's a big domino effect. And it's not one that you need great statistical knowledge or a Pro Football Focus account or Next Gen Stats. If the Eagles can open up the run, the Saints have to respect it. That opens up the play action. There go the deep passes. And we're off to the races. this game could be a shootout. There's every chance the Eagles defense stands up and makes this a very low scoring game. I can't see that happening. I do think this would be a tightly contested shootout. Foles has won in these situations before. He did it on the biggest stage of all. I don't see why I wouldn't be able to do it again, but if he's going to do so, the Eagles have to come up with something big. And talking of something big, it's time, ladies and gentle friends. I say ladies, I think there might be minor to one listening to this now, actually. So that's happened. The WCW wish has gone through the floor. So there's that. Just apply within phillysportsnetwork@gmail.com for a new WCW co-host. That would be fantastic. No, I'm kidding. But right, it's time for your favourite part of the show. If it's not your favourite part of the show, then sorry I called it your favourite part of the show, but it's mine. Thank you. Next, where I take to Twitter all day, spamming. You make me look silly sometimes. I put loads of tweets out asking for questions, and like 2 of you reply. Spam me. Just ask me what my favourite type of pizza is or something, and then I'll I'll answer it on the show. But we did get a few of you guys in. I know you guys are some of the die-hard listeners as well. So, thank you. Next, Ryan O'Donnell. Is there a specific route or concept that the Saints use that the Eagles have to take away? Thomas, the ball big? Oh, it's happening again. Thomas, the ball in big situations that the Eagles have to prepare for. That could be one of them. I think I've misread that tweet, to be brutally honest. I'm off a 9-hour shift here on 2 hours sleep, so my head's gone a little bit. But I basically understand what you're saying. Is there something the Eagles need to be watching out for here? Do you know what? I genuinely don't think so. If I'm brutally honest, if I'm a defensive coordinator, which wouldn't happen, but looking at this game, you don't want to focus on the film of the Saints blowing you out, because if they're running up the score, your team's not quit, I think that would be an extreme word, but they were certainly demoralised. It's not an accurate representation of what a real 50-50 effort would be. A good game to watch, I think, will be the Dallas and Saints game, in a game where the Saints offense didn't look out of this world, and it's one of the few games it did, and there was a little run, actually, where the Saints actually kind of struggled. And in those games, the Cowboys play similar looks. They run a lot of cover 1, a lot of cover 3, and that makes it difficult for Drew Brees to sling the ball down the field, because you're going to have those 2 corners that take away the sidelines and then the 1 man over the top. If I'm right in saying this, I don't have the number to hand, so please forgive me if I'm wrong, but during that game against the Cowboys, of the 21 of his attempts went 5 yards or less through the air, which was 75% of his passes. Which is nuts, right? So 21 of his attempts went 5 yards or less through the air. So that's just check down Charlie. That is Sam Bradford level. He did it against the Panthers in week 13. I think he also did it a couple times last season against teams like the Dolphins was one of them. Again, another team that play a lot of cover 1, a lot of cover 3, and they're starting to play aggressive at cornerback. And that's what the Eagles are doing. If you've seen my film room earlier this week, you look at players like CRE'VON LeBlanc, who are getting their hands on these players now. They're not afraid to initiate a punch at the line of scrimmage. And while there's not really a dead route, let's say, it's not like there's a certain corner post that the Eagles run with the tight end is always going to get you open. Michael Thomas is just open by himself, just by simply existing. What the Eagles need to do is just make sure there's plenty of cover 1, plenty of cover 3. Make sure you've got those extra DBs on the field. Play a lot of nickel. I would honestly ease Sidney Jones into the game if he's available, and just try and confuse the Saints a little bit. Try and mix things up. Take a linebacker out if you need to. Keep it skinny, keep it athletic, keep it light, and then try and eliminate the run game as well. But the main thing is just try and keep the ball ahead of you. And this game may look like that final few minutes of the Panthers game for most of the afternoon. And you know what? It wouldn't be the worst thing in the world, because they've adapted. We've seen what the Pickett defense looks like now, where they bring Camus Grugier-Hill down to the line to sniff out the screens or the runs or anything coming out of the flat, and it works wonders. It would not surprise me if the Eagles take bend but don't break. They start their corners a little further off. They start that safety a bit further back, and they drop in the extra linebacker. Something that's just going to force Drew Brees to take the check down. You don't want him throwing 20-30 yards down the field. And if you can stop that, and you can get Nick Foles to do the opposite against the worst rated pass defense in the NFL, then that's when you're going to have success. Thank you next to Classic Jeff, who has become my Twitter bromance partner since meeting him in London at the Eagles game. That was a fantastic experience. But Jeff is a true standout guy on Twitter if you don't follow him already. One player to be the hero this weekend for the Birds, and why? Ooh, do I really have to... Do we have to go down that road again? Do we really have to go down that? Captain CRE'VON! And the reason why is because he is Captain CRE'VON. And for the last 3 weeks, I've predicted that this man gets an interception. And do you know what? It hasn't happened. And I don't know why. And I'm like, Maman LeBlanc, what is going on? Tell me. You know, get him reared up. Just give CRE'VON some extra cookie crisp in the morning. Get him fired up. But I genuinely think that the way that man has played over the last month has been so sensational. There is a big chance that he can become the starting nickel corner next year. He has been thunderous in taking away those curls and flats, which against the Bears was quite big. Against the Saints will be even bigger. The majority of his time in that game against the Bears, he wasn't lined up in man coverage. He wasn't even lined up in what I would call like a zone deep, let's say. His whole responsibility was curls and flats, and he'd go out to the side, there's no one there, he drops back into coverage. If there is, he comes down and makes a tackle, and that is where he stands good at. However, I'm predicting he gets an interception because his form has been so strong, confidence will be sky high, and he's hitting like a freight train. Thank you. Next, so this isn't actually a question, but Dr. Dutch in a ski mask says, I think our linebackers step up and have a surprising day. I don't know if I actually think this, or my mind is manifesting, because I know our linebackers need to step up. It's 6 of one, half dozen of the other. I think the Eagles linebackers definitely need to step up. But Nigel Bradham had, I would say, the best game of his season last week against the Bears. I think Jordan Hicks had the best game of his season last week against the Bears. I think Camus Grugier-Hill has been still one of the most underrated players on this team, as he was last year as the lead special teams tackler. I think you're completely right in that they're going to need a step up on that front. However, we've still got more questions to come from you guys, so thank you. Next, Montgomery James. What do the Eagles do differently to stop the Saints' effectiveness in the red zone this time around? Or is the difference in personnel enough? Now, that is a great question. I think the Eagles have definitely tuned up their red zone defense since that game. It's hard to look at that game and say the Eagles attacked it with a full winning mentality. Just the aggressiveness, I think that the will in that game, maybe the execution was certainly not there. It's hard to look at that game and take anything from it other than the wheels slowly fell off the wagon. So the Saints' dominance in the red zone may not really have a lot to do with how the Eagles were, but I do think their change in personnel has been a welcome addition, and I do think that it all comes down to that red zone defense, as it has in the last few weeks. Can you allow Chicago down to the 5-yard line and force them into a field goal? Can you allow the Texans to drive the field and only take 3 points? That's been the question. I think it's exactly the same here. The Eagles can't allow BREES to throw downfield, and that means keeping him out of the red zone and forcing those key field goals. And that, ladies and gentlemen, we've got one more. We've got one more. So at Doc Double Doink says, bigger impact, Eagles offensive line or defensive line? That is a big time question, because the Saints have got an elite run defense, the Eagles have an elite offensive line, the Eagles have an elite defensive line, the Saints have got a very good offensive front that for some reason has been Belichick with all the offensive linemen listed as questionable or limited on the injury report, which I really don't understand why. Because let's be brutally honest, they've had 2 weeks off. If you have 2 weeks off and you go back to work and you've still got a cold, you've been up to no good. So I think that's definitely some Belichick level tactics. I don't want to give anything away. I would say, if I'm honest, the Eagles defensive line, because they need to stop the run and they need to force BREES to throw, and if you can only throw underneath, again, it's that chain reaction. I do think that the last 3 weeks I've seen Fletcher Cox and Michael Bennett take over. The way both of those guys are playing right now, they are playing out of their minds, and it is such a sight for sore eyes. After Cox getting virtually no help earlier this year, to see him now firing at all cylinders is just outstanding, and the re-emergence of Timmy Jernigan to swallow up those blocks in the B gap, to really take the weight off the shoulders of Fletcher, has been such a massive boost to this unit. And then of course you've got guys like Chris Long as well. So if you're talking about guys who can read the read option, who can account for guys like Taysom Hill, who can keep their eyes focused on what Mark Ingram and Alvin Kamara are doing, I genuinely feel like this defensive line is key, partnered with the presence of Nigel Bradham. But that is the end for another episode of Thank You Next, and it's almost the end for this podcast. I feel like the Monday podcasts are always a bit longer because there's so much more to talk about. It's the reaction, it's the excitement, or, you know, it could be the depression, depending which way you look at it. But there's so much more there, and then the Friday ones are just warming you in, getting you a bit excited, and the stuff I would normally talk about in the podcast is conveniently broken down into 15-minute film breakdowns, which are on the YouTube channel if you're not there already, so check those out. And then the articles through the week. I like to keep the podcast as its own separate entity, And if you can see more than one of those, like the podcast and the article, you don't want to read the same thing twice. So for that reason, there will be no story on Nate Sudfeld. You can go to phillysportsnetwork.com and read that one. But we want to keep this fun. And before we go, we need a pep talk, don't we? Because we haven't had one. Not the last time I played Land of Hope and Glory, the Eagles won. So we're going to go with that again. Because I am unbeaten in these situations. And I feel that the Eagles currently, plus 8.5 points on the spread in Vegas if you're going to bet it. I told you last week to lump your house on the Philadelphia Eagles. This week, I want you to lump your dogs, okay? Go into the bookmaker with your chihuahua, put him over the desk, and just sit him there. And the guy's going to go, Liam, what are you doing? I'm like, I'll have my dog on the Eagles. Who are the dogs? And he's going to go, we can't take that. And I'm like, well, take him to a rescue home, but you're going to take the dog, all right? And then you come home and your wife's like, Liam, where's the dog? And we're like, the dog's coming home, football's coming home, and so is £30,000. That is how much that dog is worth. In fact, you can't even put a value on dogs. That's how confident I am. The Eagles are going to cover the spread by plus 8.5 points. Why? Because this is Nick goddamn Foles. I sound so American, but this is Nick Foles. He has come from nothing to here. This is the team that embodies everything Philadelphia. Wow, there needs to be a player called... When they're stealthy, it's Philadelphia now, alright? If anyone steals that, I swear to God, I'm coming for you. But this team is going to be Philadelphia because they wear ski masks, alright? I've worked it in. But this embodies everything. This is the reason I fell in love with Philadelphia sports. It's that gritty underdog. It doesn't matter what odds you face in life, what adversity, what challenge, no matter who knocks you down, you get straight back up, you punch them in the face, and you keep moving forward. And that is what this Eagles team are doing. This Saints defense is vulnerable. It's wobbling. It's shaking. It's having a little wee down its leg. The Eagles are not the same team. And as I said in last week's podcast with Tony Dungy, he's told a story about how when he faced a team in the regular season, they lost in the postseason because they got complacent. If the Saints are going to take, 250k's worth of cash and a Super Bowl trophy and a wheelbarrow with armed guards. Right, first of all, on that note, who takes armed guards into a locker room? Of your own players. Now, someone in there has been up to no good, and Sean Payton has gone, right, I would take this in on my own, but that guy over there, Eli Apple, he's going to steal that for his mum. He is going to steal that money for his mum. So, get armed guards in. That's basically what he's done. So, Eli Apple is the reason this whole meme exists, to begin with. But if you need that level of motivation, just wait until Doug Peterson rolls in with a wheelbarrow filled up to the brim of melting Haagen-Dazs ice cream. And he goes, if you want this trophy, then you make sure you play like the champions. You win 3 games and you can bathe in it. And you can have snowball fights with ice cream. And that is what's going to win this team. But genuinely, the culture around this team, I've never seen anything like it. It is the stuff you would see in a film. You just don't see it. To come from the crushing loss to the Titans, the crushing loss to the Panthers, the 2 losses to Dallas, the loss to the Saints. I don't know what else you want from this team. But they will not quit. And now there's a sour taste in their mouths. They were humiliated. They were embarrassed. They almost had their season destroyed. And somehow they've picked themselves back up and they look more dangerous than they have all year long. All year long. I would take this team right now than what we saw in week 3 against the Colts. Or in week 8 against the Jags, because that was my favourite game ever because I was there, but shush. Genuinely, this Eagles team is even rivaling the form I think we saw last year in the playoff run. The playoff magic is back. You can feel it in the air. You can feel the excitement, the tension. You know it's coming. You know it's coming. And where is it coming? It's coming home. It's coming home. It's coming. Football's coming home. It's coming home. It's coming home. It's coming. Football's coming home. My name is Liam Jenkins. You can follow me at LiamJenkins21 on Twitter. If you've enjoyed this show, slap that subscribe button and leave a rating. Bleeding Green Nation Radio, I love them to bits, but they've got 500 ratings on theirs podcast. Do you know how much I have? 6. It's not on, guys. I know you're slamming the YouTube views, and we've got thousands of you watching this now. So do the thing. Open your phone, smack the button, and the Eagles will smack the Saints as a result. I will talk to you guys on Monday for another Eagles podcast, The Outside Insider, returns. Thank you so much for lending me your time, lending me your ears. I'll talk to you on Monday. And enjoy the weekend. Go Birds.